Rightio, second glance at a jaguar, remembering that of course this is the second poem that we have based upon this particular animal. Now, the Hughes family lived very closely to the zoo, and so we may assume that this is a particular jaguar in the zoo, or perhaps it is perhaps a little bit deeper than that, as we'll find out as we go through. This is from the collection Jaguar as well, which, as you recall, all of these ones we've had for the past 3 or 4 have been from the same collection, printed 3 years after the death of Sylvia Plath, and in fact this particular Jaguar piece was written 10 years after the original Jaguar. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about as we look at this from a holistic perspective before we go into it in a bit more depth. Number one, we don't have any break in stanzas. If you recall, in that Jaguar, there was a breakdown of quatrains. Here we don't have that. That straight away gives us a bit of a point of difference in the fact that we are looking at this Jaguar from a different perspective. So visually or graphology-wise, we have got a different aspect. The second thing I want you to notice here is the actual title. The first thing is that this isn't the Jaguar, it is a Jaguar, which is a indefinite article. Remember, the Jaguar was a definite article referring to one specific Jaguar. This time we are perhaps looking at any Jaguar through the use of that indefinite article. Second, so we're looking at this for the second time. This isn't the first time we've seen it, so therefore you can imagine that there is a bit more detail given than previously. If you recall, in the Jaguar, we didn't actually see the animal for the first half of the poem, and then the second half we looked at the way that it was reacting with the environment, which is of course the imprisonment, if you like, of the zoo. But this time, from start to finish, we are looking at the actual physical form of the Jaguar. The second important thing is that we have this word glance. Now, a glance is, in terms of part of speech, is a verb, and the important thing to note here is that it is quick. It is not like it's an examination or an exploration. It's a glance. It's a fleeting glance, if you like. And from that, there is very little detail that we could almost expound from that. But what is important to note here is that there's a couple of things. First of all, that idea of the speed, but second of all, the idea of a glancing blow, if you like. A glancing blow is the use of the adverb or to hit someone, but not quite strike it exactly. So if you give a glancing blow to someone, it's not like a punch in the face. It's like a punch where the punch actually goes past, but it does hit you on the way. So if you imagine the punch continues, but you do get a little bit along the way. So that's important because it's the way that Jaguars kill. Jaguars kill firstly by knocking the prey off balance. So there could be a connection there. Perhaps. Not definite, but perhaps. They'll knock the prey to the ground and then destroy them. So, this is a long poem, and overall we are dealing with description. But as well as that, a very important part of this particular poem is the use of syntax, or the sentence construction. If you look at the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 lines are one sentence, and then from line 6 through to line 15 is another sentence. So these are long, drawn-out sentences, and that relates with the idea of captivity. The third sentence is very short, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. This is what is referred to as an alliterative accentual poem. A-L-L-I-T-E-R-A-T-I-V-E. Alliterative accentual. A-C-C-E-N-T-U-A-L. And it connects with the idea of the old-fashioned, like by old-fashioned I mean sort of Old English, Anglo-Saxon style of writing. And if you recall, this is the second poem where Hughes is going back into those old, almost mythological eras to talk about ideas in poetry. The other one, of course, being thistles. It's a time, as we've said before, that he is into his shamanism. And shamanism is that connection with the spirit world. And in the spirit world, there is a connection between the warrior and the jaguar. The physical, human embodiment of a jaguar is the warrior. Jaguar, of course, is a renowned cat where we are dealing with ferocity, where we are dealing with strength and vitality. Remember, that was taken away from the jaguar in the initial poem, and again we see this jaguar in captivity. But the description is much more vivid. So, skin full of bowls, he bowls them. The hip going in and out of joint, dropping the spine with the urgency of his hurry, like a cat going under thrown stones, under cover, glancing sideways, running under his spine. A terrible, stump-legged waddle like a thick Aztec disemboweler, club swinging, trying to grind some square socket between his hind legs round, carrying his head like a brazier of spilling embers, and the black bit of his mouth, he takes it between his back teeth, he has to wear his skin out. He swipes a lap at the water trough as he turns, swiveling the ball of his heel on the polished spot, showing his belly like a butterfly. At every stride he has to turn a corner in himself and correct it. His head is like the worn-down stump of another whole jaguar. His body is just the engine shoving it forward, lifting the air up and shoving on under. The weight of his fangs hanging, the mouth open, bottom jaw combing the ground, a gorged look, gangster, club-tailed, lumped along behind gracelessly. He's wearing himself to heavy ovals, muttering some mantra, some drum song of murder, to keep his rage brightening, making his skin intolerable, spurned by the rosettes, the cane brands, wearing the spots off on the inside, rounding some revenge, going like a prayer wheel, the head dragging forward, the body keeping up, the hind legs lagging. He coils, he flourishes, the blackjack tail as if looking for a target, hurrying through the underworld, soundless. Now while there's no defined rhyme scheme here, there is a rhythmic pattern that is created throughout. And that rhythmic pattern is almost connected with a kind of chant, almost like an incantation, as if there's some spirituality to be had from saying this poem aloud. If you recall that the jaguar we had before was of primal significance, of strength and power and ferocity, where he imagines the outside world and is pacing the world is going underneath him, if you recall. This one, it's quite a different jaguar that we've seen. Whether or not it is the same one, not sure. But if it is the same jaguar, all of that vitality seems to have been pulled out from it. There is a lot of description of the way in which this animal moves, but the movement seems a lot more laboured. And along the way, we'll go through and just make some sort of connection to that. So, skin full of bowls, he bowls them. Now, straight away, you'll notice that there is a repetition of this word bowls. So, and there is actually a change here in the different part of speech. So, we go from a noun, skin full of bowls. Now, just to break it down a bit further, skin fill means full. So filled to the skin. Often it is associated with alcohol. You've had a skinful means you are drunk. You've drank so much that you are now just alcohol covered in skin. That's kind of the idea that's being presented in hyperbole. Here, skin full of bolls. Now, what's important to note here is that this is a wild animal, and so the way that it is fed in a zoo is through bolls. It's through an unnatural source. So we can assume here that this particular jaguar is either filled up with food that's come from this bowl, which is a man-made product given to this wild animal. So therefore, the question becomes, is this animal still wild, or is it now tame because it has been manufactured within a zoo environment, created by the zoo environment? He bowls them. Now we've moved into a verb, from noun to verb. Bowls them, of course, is we can relate this directly to a cricketing term, which is to bowl is to release the ball, after a throwing action. So this could be a throwing action in terms of a movement away, hitting these bowls away. Certainly, it's a sign of frustration, or aggression, or speed, or however you want to interpret that particular aspect. Skin full of bowls, he bowls them, the hip going in and out of joint, dropping the spine with the urgency of his hurry, like a cat going under thrown stones, under covers, glancing sideways, running under his spine. Now what you'll notice there is that first subordinating clause, skin full of bowls, he bowls them. That clause seems to be almost disconnected with the rest of the poem. It kind of sits there by itself. It's ambiguous. And with that ambiguity comes this sense of disconnect that I mentioned earlier. And so what you need to be mindful of with that is that it is almost as if the cat himself is disconnected from his life. He has been removed from his environment and placed into captivity, disconnected with what's going on. The hip going in and out of joint, so this displacement of the bone structure. So articulating these elements of the bone is important. That's an important part of the physiology of a jaguar, where it allows them to run with greater speed, dropping the spine with the urgency of his hurry. So this litheness, this power is really brought to the fore here with dropping the spine with the urgency of his hurry. So when he needs to go, he can go. He can manipulate his own bone structure to allow him speed, prowess, to stalk, whatever it might be. If you've seen big cats stalking in the wild, they're able to contort themselves into a range of positions while still being able to move gracefully. With the urgency of his hurry, he's able to do these manipulations with great speed, with great ability. But in captivity, that skill is wasted, is not needed. What is, I think, an interesting point here is that the comparison to the simile on line 4, like a cat. Now, a jaguar is a cat. So to say that this big cat is like a tame domestic tabby is really quite deprecating towards this animal of strength and power. Going along under thrown stones, under cover, glancing sideways, running under his spine. So while, yes, we have this cat which seems to be alert, we also have this impression that this cat is not what he was. That through captivity, this animal has been reduced, compared to a domestic cat. Doesn't have the same power that it did have. Look here at the use of syntactical points or the use of comma. Like a cat going along under throwing stones, comma, under cover, comma, glancing sideways, comma, running under his spine, full stop. The use of these small clauses or phrases here adds to the idea of speed, of anxiety, and perhaps this aspect of anxiety. And if you can imagine a small cat hiding away under cover, it's not what we think of when we think of a great power cat of a Jaguar level. When I think of that term scaredy cat, and to compare that to a Jaguar. A terrible, stump-legged waddle like a thick Aztec disemboweler. Now, interesting use of imagery here. Look at the way the gait, G-A-I-T, of the animal is used. A gait is the way in which you walk. So if you're referring to someone's walk, you're referring to their gait. So this stump-legged waddle. Now, to waddle is usually associated with the animal, the duck. Now, in terms of a derogatory term, waddle is often referred to particularly for heavily pregnant women or heavily overweight people who don't walk properly, shall we say. So that the use of waddle is actually quite derogatory. To say this stump-legged waddle about this cat is a fairly interesting thing to say. And that may relate back to the first line, Skinful of Voles, where this cat is no longer, it has all the structure of what it should be able to do, but in captivity has been allowed to grow fat and therefore useless. Perhaps this is one reading of it. Like a thick Aztec disemboweler, and that word, that adjectival thick, again, adds to it. Aztec is Central American, and it relates back to that historic view of early peoples. The Aztec people were an ancient race of people, certainly in terms of disemboweling. While you still have references to the Aztecs, and I think there might even be a few people who still practice Aztec rituals, it's certainly a minority, an extreme minority. And the idea of disemboweling certainly wouldn't happen anymore. But Central American Aztec culture and is all related with this shamanism idea and the connection with the spirit world. Certainly the Aztecs had a strong connection with the spirit world. A disemboweler, now this is a visceral image. To disembowel someone means to remove the guts from the stomach. In a gruesome ritual, cutting the stomach open, removing intestines and all those key organs that you would have there, sometimes leaving them strewn out along the ground. Now, why is this related back to a jaguar? Well, if you think about the way in which a jaguar will kill, or any of those great big cats will kill, is to take down the animal and then to effectively disembowel them. So that was referring to the predatory instinct of the big cat. But relating it to this idea of the Aztec warrior, with their clubs swinging, and then gives this almost paradoxical view here of trying to grind some square socket, square being the important part there, behind his hind legs round. So there's those juxtaposed ideas, square and round. And if you think of that expression, putting a square peg in a round hole, or the other way of a round peg in a square hole. What that refers to is trying to force something that doesn't fit. And obviously that's an idiom. The square peg round hole is probably being alluded to here. That idiom is being alluded to here. And that's an important thing to make note of because, again, taking the cat out of its natural environment, forcing it to be in an environment where it cannot flourish. And what results from that is this somewhat shell of an animal. The word socket, of course, is, and when associated with legs, connects with that going in and out of joint from the line 2. So this physiology of the cat, or the skeletal makeup of the cat, is being referred to over and over again. And that, I think the reason for that is that it's referring back to the natural design of this jaguar. You know, at its root, at its base level, at its structural level, literally the structural level to the skeletal reference, is going back to what this animal should be. Carrying his head like a brazier of spilling embers. Now, this is the third simile that we've had thus far. So there is a building up or a series of similes to compare this cat to other things. But the things that it's being compared to are not what is expected. First of all, a domestic cat. Second of all, some fat Aztec warrior. Now, a brazier. Now, a brazier is an outdoor fire, basically. Braziers is a metal container and you put in your wood, etc., and you sit around it. So like a campfire that you could have in a posh place, basically. Of spilling embers. Now I would suggest that this is first of all a need for care. So if you are carrying a brazier of spilling embers, then you have to do it with great care because there is a danger. And of course, carrying his head, the head, of course, of all the parts of the jaguar is the most dangerous because that's where the teeth are, that's where the fangs are. That's what's ultimately doing this ripping apart. So there's still a fear involved with it, but the fear is perhaps not what it was. As well as that, you've got the imagery that's created here. Braziers are usually black, and in fact, in the next line, the black bit of his mouth. So there's a juxtaposition between the black of the coloration of the brazier, and then embers, which are orangey, reddy coloured. And that I would suggest is almost a reference to the look of the jaguar, with its yellow, orangey colour with black spots. He takes it between his back teeth. He has to wear his skin out. And so this wearing skin out may be a reference to passing of time. So a way for him to pass the time is to chew on his lip. He has to wear his skin out between his back teeth. He's got to use his teeth for something. He's restless. Think of the nervous habits that people have, biting their nails, chewing the sides of your nails, or having a nervous scratch or whatever it might be, and almost as if his nervous thing or his restless thing is to bite the inside of his mouth here. He swipes a lap at the water trough as he turns. This is a really interesting line. This suggests that there is a sense of annoyance. He swipes a lap. Remember, swipes is another part of this brutal aspect of the cat itself. So the head with the teeth, and the swiping, which is referencing the paw, with the claws. So to swipe means he grabs a bit of water, the water trough as he turns. A lap at the water trough as he turns, swiveling the ball of his heel on the polished spot. This polished spot as if it has been worn and worn and worn, and the movement of his foot, the swiveling of the ball of his foot, the movement of that spinning of, if you like, on that same bit of ground has caused it to be polished. From repetitive movement, this has been polished, showing his belly like a butterfly. Another simile. Another simile. But this time a butterfly, the most harmless of all creatures. Why a butterfly? My interpretation of this is the pattern. The pattern of this particular Jaguar with the spots on it has got the look reminiscent of a butterfly. Now butterflies are the same on both sides. They are a mirror image of themselves. And so perhaps he's saying here that like a butterfly, these designs are mirror images of themselves. But perhaps in that mirror image is a bit of a play on words there, where this animal looks like a jaguar, has all the markings of a jaguar, but isn't a jaguar. Has lost its ability to be a jaguar due to what's happened. At every stride, he has to turn a corner in himself and correct it. Now, my interpretation of this, and you are welcome to have your own, but as with all these things, what do these words mean to you? Your interpretation is as good as mine. At every stride, he has to turn a corner in himself and correct it, almost as if he is so constrained by his environment that there is no one way he can go. He has no freedom. I think it's important to note that it's interesting that this particular animal is a he. So this masculine pronoun is probably an important thing to note. In the wild, the male is the dominant species in terms of cats. Is the leader. And yet here we see this cat reduced. His head is like a worn down stump of another jaguar. His body is just the engine shoving it forward, lifting the air up and shoving on under. Now, shoving is repeated here. Shoving as if just pushing with force. Aggressive behavior. As if these words are imitating the movement of the jaguar. You notice at this point there's quite a bit of consonants going on, quite a lot of the harsh consonant sounds coming through, pushing this jaguar forward. In similar way to the pike, when we talked about the pike being a slave to nature, this is what it's expected to do. We see a similar idea here, where the expectation of the jaguar is that it needs to keep moving. His head is like, and again the use of the simile, the worn down stump. The reduction again. Reducing this animal from what it once was to a stump. The same way that you would have a great tree reduced down to the stump. Of another whole jaguar. Again, that look and feel of a jaguar, but it's not a jaguar. His body is just the engine. Look at that word just, the adverb just. His body is just the engine, shoving it forward. As if this body still has within it an engine, the ability, but it's just not there. Hasn't got the capacity, hasn't got the capability to do what it once did. lifting the air up and shoving on under. The weight of his fangs hanging, the mouth open, bottom jaw combing the ground. It's almost like this is a freight train. That there is a force within this jaguar that's being withheld. A gorged look. Now, gorged, of course, is if you gorge on something, you attack it with great force. Like imagine a big cat gorging on an antelope or whatever it might be as its prey. But here, this has got a gorged look, as if it has had bits taken out of it, as if it has had bits removed. And then we have this interesting use of gangster. Now, the connotation of the word gangster is that there is a sense of intimidating confidence. That a gangster is a powerful member of society. But it's a member of society that works in kind of the shadows, outside of the expectation. A gangster in the 1960s is referring to the sort of mafia idea. Great violence, great show of strength and confidence, working outside the expectations of society. A club tail lumped along behind gracelessly. Now, that gracelessly, the adverb there, graceless or lacking in grace, lacking in decorum and beauty, completely contrasts with the view of the jaguar in the previous poem, where this was a vibrant cat. Now we have a graceless cat. He's wearing himself to heavy ovals. So there is a visual reference there of the movement back and forth around his enclosure. Muttering some mantra. So look at that word muttering. If you talk about somebody muttering, then they're almost a crazy person. Some mutterings of a madman. Or if you mutter under your breath, you're being negative about something under your breath. Again, this reduction of volume now. A jaguar is expected to not roar like a lion, but certainly have that power in the voice to be able to create sound, and great sound, not some muttering. But the reference of mantra is important. Mantra, bringing back to that idea of a incantation or a chant, something that is repeated. A mantra is something that you repeat over and over again, and that draws into that movement of the cat and the situation that the cat's in. Some drum song of murder to keep his rage brightening, making his skin intolerable, spurred by the rosettes, the cane brands, wearing the spots off from the inside, rounding some revenge. So there's so many references here to fury, frustration, some drum song of murder, as if there's some drum song is the Aztec reference again, that early peoples who have these spirit gods who they play drums to in a repetitive pattern of murder. Think of those if you've ever read Lord of the Flies, there's that same idea of creating some sort of incantation around death, some sort of sacrifice to keep his rage brightening. So he's got these passions in him that he wants to keep alive. He doesn't want to lose who he is, but he is just through natural, unnatural reasons, making his skin intolerable. Now, this is an important thing, thinking about skin full of bowls at the start. It's almost as if the way that this cat looks, the skin, his fur, that's the only thing left about him that is a jaguar. The way that the colour on his skin or the markings on his skin is the only thing that makes him a jaguar now. Spurred by, that makes it intolerable. Almost like he's no longer able to even connect with that anymore. It's intolerable to think that he is a jaguar. Spurred by the rosettes, so frustrated by the rosettes, those red blood marks, that is. The Cain brands. Now this is a biblical allusion. Cain brands is a biblical allusion in terms of the story of Cain and Abel, where Cain killed Abel, his brother. And as a result was marked by God. So as if he's got these marks, this cat has got these marks on him which show aggression, but he can't show aggression. Wearing the spots off from the inside. Again, see that he has been changed internally. It's almost changing who he is externally. The food he's fed, the life he lives, his internal systems have been manipulated, and that's resulted in almost an external change. Rounding some revenge, this creation of fury, this creation of wanting revenge but can do nothing about it. Revenge, that level of hate inside you. Going like a prayer wheel. So again, and these are all circular in description. A prayer wheel. So again, a religious connotation, or certainly a spiritual connotation. The head dragging forward, the body keeping up, the hind legs lagging. Look at the verbs there. Dragging, keeping up, and lagging. So the will wants to move faster, but the body cannot. He coils. He flourishes. Look at that repetition or the parallel structure there. He coils. He flourishes. The blackjack tail as if looking for a target. A blackjack is a club, or like holding a physical club that you would use to knock somebody out. And it's referring to the strength of his actual tail here. Now notice there the word coils. To coil means to reduce into a coil. In the same way a snake will coil itself or in a circular motion, ready to strike. So almost as if he's able to prepare himself to strike. And in that moment he flourishes. In that moment he is reminiscent of what he once was. With this black jack of a tail, so this fierce tail able to assist him in pouncing. This cat preparing himself to pounce, looking for a target, looking for something to take off this revenge from, hurrying through the underworld. So this connection with death, or the underworld is Hades, or some devilish aspect there. But in the end, this final word, soundless. Soundless as in lacking sound, or lacking volume, lacking noise, or just lacking in general. So while we have the term second glance at a jaguar, as you can see here, it's almost it's an examination of this cat. And so in this moment, Hughes is capturing his observations of what this cat once was. Now, if we take it from a metaphorical view, if you recall, we said that perhaps Hughes is the jaguar in the jaguar. We could argue that perhaps Hughes is the jaguar again here, where he's older now. He's able to reflect more on his life. He's able to look at his life without Sylvia Plath. And while perhaps it was meant to be I was going to say that was meant to be a liberation. I don't think the death of his wife is a liberation, but certainly the there's no freedom for him. He is still trapped by the memory, perhaps he'll still be playing, or he is still stuck in his ways and who he is. He feels like this poet, but he feels like he's constrained by the world. Perhaps it may even be that reference to the idea of a zoo, where he feels like he's part of the zoo. You hear many celebrities talking about the celebrity life as like being on show, and as if you are an animal in a zoo. Perhaps he's alluding to that as well. As always, please take your own reading from it. That's just one interpretation.